This video is not going to be a light one. You can probably tell by the lack of a funny one-liner in the intro, which is usually how I start my rants off. If you've been following this situation at all, you probably know that I said I wouldn't be making any updates unless something happened. Well, there have definitely been things that have happened on Lucille's side, but that's not what ultimately pushed me to make this follow-up. There are two main reasons why I'm making this video. Number one being to properly share and explain my story in a calm and detailed manner, because non-sexual grooming is a huge problem I don't think people take seriously enough. The second reason is because I'm very afraid for Lucille's audience who continue to support her. This video will thoroughly dissect Lucille's response video, and provide more context and proof as to what happened during the time Lucille and I were romantically involved with one another. Before the video even starts, I would like to address the Nagito sprite comments. Before the situation, I had little to no clue who Nagito was, but upon learning that he was a character from the popular series Danganronpa, it became clear what she was trying to do here. That is, to present herself in the likeness of another beloved character, so that people who already have a pre-existing affection for that character would be more likely to latch onto and believe her.
Before we start this session, I'd like to address the obvious. My name isn't and never was Sam nor Max. The reason I was called by either of these names was that at first everyone knew me by the character Sam, who was a skeleton. That was a carbon copy of Sans the skeleton, except that he wore a blue wig. Max was a nickname closest to my real name, and as a bonus, it was also unisex. Soon after a while, everyone called me by Sam, and those who knew me a little better would call me Max. I'm not upset with either names because during the time I was called Sam/Max was when I was going through my transitional phase. Most of you should know what I'm referring to, right? I wasn't comfortable with my female-given body and tried to play the role of a male. During this point, I was quote-unquote dating Streamline Workshop, and for the sake of this video, I'll be calling her Iris. Wait, did I air quote just now? So instead of calling me Sam or Max, the possible predator, how about you call me Lucille or Lou instead? Calling someone by a dead name isn't very polite and, quite frankly, embarrassing.
Lucille starts off the video focusing on her name, instead of the situation at large. The beginning segment is meant to sway the viewers into making it seem that I am a scumbag, by purposely referring to her by a name she no longer acknowledges. She also makes sure to tie her old name to my claim, and acts as if, by changing her name, these old claims are no longer tied to her. Except, before my video came out, your channel description still asked people to call you by Sam or Max. Unfortunately, I do not have a screenshot of her channel description pre-call out other than this. You can choose to believe or disbelieve my claim. But whether you choose to believe me or not, I had no clue Lucille had decided to change her name in any capacity. I mentioned in both my most toxic person in the animation meme community video and my original call-out video that I had not spoken to Lucille in a very long time. The last time I spoke to her was in June this year, and she still went by the names Max or Sam. Trying to paint me as if I had previous knowledge that you had changed your name, and am purposely using it despite that, is a shitty thing to do, and is the first example of the lengths she will go to paint herself as the victim and everyone else as the perpetrators. In the previous clip, we also have our first example of Lucille being a genuinely shitty person and going out of her way to hurt others. I have to say this first. I do not condone dead naming. My previous videos should make it very apparent that I do not like to go out of my way to insult or hurt anyone by using elements of their life against them. Hence why I am referring to Lucille by her preferred name. With that said, while making my previous call out on Lucille, I was still under the impression she went by the names Sam and Max, and she mentions in the video that people who didn't really know her would refer to her as Sam. It's a much more impersonal name, just like how Stream is an impersonal name. I referred to Lucille as Sam in my previous video to be mindful of her boundaries. I knew the effect my video could have on someone's mental state, so I did not want to add unnecessary trauma to the mix. The same cannot be said for Lucille. Lucille uses my real name throughout the entire video. Yes, my name is out there. Does that mean I'm comfortable with strangers calling me Iris? No. Does that mean I'm comfortable with my groomer calling me Iris? Absolutely not. What she is doing is manipulative by using my real-life name because she knows it will put me under intense amounts of distress, especially since she could easily have used the name Stream as she has done so before. Lucille, by the way, is 22. There's no way in the 7 levels of hell she did not know the consequences of her actions. If you believe me to be simply speculating about this, here is one of her replies where she directly acknowledges she did this out of spite.
Which brings me to my first argument. Or would it be more of a statement? I'm not exactly arguing with anyone right now. Would this be considered presenting my thoughts on the current topic? Anyway.
Her nonchalant attitude about everything gives the viewer the impression that the situation is not that bad and a lot more casual, like you're just talking about your run-of-the-mill tea.
The continuous suspicions on why I changed my username and profile picture. Sadly, I can't say anything on the matter because if I told you I was planning on changing it before the situation started, you wouldn't believe me, right? I can only present this to you. I was planning, or at the very least thinking about changing my username on all of my social media accounts to H0peful Lucille on the 19th. Iris's video came out a day after. But again, take what you will with a cup of salt. If I was trying to make it easier for me to run and hide, then wouldn't it have been best if I hid my channel and deleted my online presence entirely? And she has even provided a link to my channel in the description of her video. So even if I were to change my username, it wouldn't change the fact that she has easily given anyone access to find my channel. I suppose that's all I have to say about this matter. Defending myself leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But I guess I'll have to do what I can with what I have.
Lucille here clearly states this video is to defend herself. Quote, defending myself leaves a bad taste in my mouth, but I guess I'll have to make do with what I have. End quote. This video is not a proper response to my call out. This video is meant to defend herself, no matter what the mods on her channel and she herself insists.
And another thing I'd like to mention while I'm clearing up misinformation is... Can you see something wrong with these comments? Should I make it easier for you? Very well.
This sort of condescending tone continues throughout the entirety of the video. If you are on Lucille's side, it's meant to give the impression that she is confident in just picking apart the other side's argument. If you are opposing her, her tone makes you feel stupid, and like she's talking down to you for being so quick to judge her.
When I met Iris, she was the age of 15, right? Now I'm going to give you terms that I could be classified under. Pedophile, H0pophile, and H0pophile. Huh? You didn't know about these terms? You should have probably looked them up before calling me a child predator.
Since you're so fond of definitions, Lucille, let's take a look at the definition for a predator. A person or group that ruthlessly exploits others. What would the definition of a child predator be? A person or group that ruthlessly exploits children. You fit that definition, Lucille, no matter what sort of label you try to stick yourself with to make you seem less bad.
Which one did you pick? I hope you used Google to your advantage because the correct term I should be called in this case would be a H0pophile. Iris was aged 15 when both of us were romantically attracted to one another. But unfortunately, I wouldn't call myself an H0pophile, nor a H0pophile, or even a pedophile. Do you want to know why? The answer shouldn't surprise you. For the terms I've used, their general description is being attracted to a certain age group, correct? Pedophilia is defined as a recurrent and intense sexual arousing fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors involving sexual activity with a prepubescent child or children, typically those under the age of 13, right? H0pophilia is a strong, persistent sexual interest by adults in pubescent children who are in early adolescence, typically ages 11 to 14. H0pophilia is the primary sexual interest in mid to late adolescence, generally ages 15 to 19. But since we're talking about philias to certain age groups, why don't I bring one more philia into the mix as my next argument? Teleophile, a person who is sexually attracted to adults. It's only fair that I call Iris a teleophile because she was attracted to an adult. But I have a feeling that bringing this up won't make the situation any easier, right?
Lucille then tries to make it seem like I am just as bad as her by sticking me with a label that sounds scary, and people are generally unfamiliar with. Except, it's not a crime to be attracted to people who are older than you. It's a natural part of evolution to be attracted to signs of maturity. That's normal. Either way, this definition cannot be applied to me, as it is well known that I am asexual, meaning I don't feel sexual attraction to anyone. Being attracted to someone who is significantly less mature to you, in mind or body, is a crime.
Well, I'll let it slide for now. Phew. I think I've said enough Google research. Oh, right. I never gave you the answer either. Well, perhaps I'll tell you some other time. Or maybe never at all, since it's not that surprising.
Lucille brushes aside the entire last section by leaving me with a definite label and herself with none. The viewer is then sure to latch on to the label that is given, and since all previous labels are just obviously bad things, will automatically assume that the label assigned to me is bad and makes me just as bad as her. This is one of the first examples of Lucille's manipulation.
Now then, you're probably wanting me to talk about my side of the story, correct? Unfortunately, it won't be that easy since you'll most likely have to take everything I say with a pint of salt. You see, my previous account is deleted. The screenshot Iris has provided should be an obvious indication that whatever I say now can't be fully proven because of the lost account and its contents. But keep in mind, would I lie in a situation like this?
Yes, you would lie, Lucille. This video is filled with nothing but your lies and manipulation.
Now I can't give you my exact word for words because of my deteriorating memory span, but why don't we do the obvious and start from the beginning, from when I first met Iris. I can't give you the approximate date, but we were both introduced to one another by a mutual friend at the time. I didn't think I'd be invited into an online family where I was the one playing the role of dad, meanwhile Iris was playing the role of mom. It wasn't an immediate attraction since I unfortunately knew that she was underage. However, it was her that initiated the crush-like behavior. But hearing that doesn't change my situation, does it?
Lucille's recounting of this situation is mostly accurate up to this point. I say mostly because she has left out an important detail that is quite incriminating to her person. Lucille and I met on the 9th of February. I found her channel through Fano shouting out Lucille on her old Discord and community tab. I was the one who asked Fano to include Lucille in the family, with the hopes of growing closer to her. So far, our recounting of the situation is the same. What Lucille failed to mention, however, is that she hid her age from me for quite some time. I can't find the exact date she revealed her age to me, but up until the 18th of February, I was still in the dark about her age. Why would Lucille frame the situation like this? It makes it seem as if I, having fully known her age, should have backed off. Never mind that I was a starstruck minor without a fully developed brain. Why would Lucille hide her age for any reason? The excuse that it's because she's part of the animation meme community can only be used to her detriment, as many adults in the community have no issue with other people knowing them to be adults. This behavior is that of a predator, whereby they hide their age while luring in the minor, and reveal it after the minor has significant emotional investment and attachment to them, so that the minor will be willing to overlook such a normally significant detail. This was quite the convenient point for you to leave out of your recounting.
Things slowly began to progress with the both of us. I'm unsure of who confessed their feelings first since that part of me is still hazy. But there is a keynote here. Neither of us officially dated. But again, that doesn't change my situation, huh?
Whether or not we were in a proper relationship, the interactions we had were still extremely, and is arguably worse since we never dated.
We were in what I'll call the honeymoon phase. We acknowledged our feelings for one another, but we never officially gave consent that we were dating because I knew she was underaged. Unfortunately, the law in Canada is lenient with the age of consent. We both agreed that we'd date when she turned the age of 16, but that never happened either. We continued to act like your typical couple. I called her by the wife nickname, and she called me by husband or honey or some other variation. Eventually, Iris told me in a personal environment that she wasn't looking for a relationship and wanted to focus on herself, her school, the whole spiel. I agreed to this. Neither of us were in a relationship from before or then on. But you can't take my word for it now, can you? Think back to what I said before. My account is deleted, right? So take everything I say with a barrel of salt. But that doesn't excuse my behavior and how I spoke to her. Rereading the screenshot she provided, it makes my skin crawl to think that I did something as gaudy as this. It's almost like I was asking for the situation to happen.
Lucille chooses to put up this particular screenshot. For those who actually pause to read it, they will rarely see anything wrong with what's being said, as it paints Lucille as a caring partner. Real funny how you didn't put this screenshot here. Lucille is trying to make it seem as if people are just overreacting to her being a caring person, and that they were a little dumb to have thought something like this was call-out-worthy.
Speaking of this situation, it reminds me of a time when I had a roleplay server, and a certain someone tried to publicly out me, just like what's happening now. I don't have the exact screenshot anymore, unfortunately, but it was a close friend of Iris asking where she was. Not the exact words, but where is Flat Chest? And I responded with, wife, or something of the sort. This person used that screenshot as a way to prove that I, if I remember correctly, sexually harassed Iris. But I did no such thing. Truth be told, I was your typical adult, thinking typical adult things and drawing typical adult things. I said typical so much that it's making my brain all fuzzy.
Lucille openly admits that she was thinking and drawing sexual things. But what is sexual harassment? Sexual harassment is defined as unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of sexual nature. With this definition, I can only say that this happened once, and it was in the previous screenshot I had shown. I do not think I can pin any more examples because at the time Lucille said these things, I was perfectly fine with them, even if I no longer am now.
Now that I've spoken of what I can remember during our first meeting and somewhat beyond that, I like to bring up the times we've physically seen each other. Unfortunately, my physical appearance doesn't look like that of a 22-year-old. I'm shorter than Iris is, and I act younger than I'm supposed to be. Our first meeting was when both of us were in our honeymoon phase. Not dating, yet we held hands, both making sure that the other was comfortable with the act. We also hugged and gave each other kisses on the cheek. There are photos of our time together, but for the sake of Iris, I won't release these images unless permitted by her.
Remember this.
However, during our second time meeting, it was after she had declared to me that she didn't want a relationship. I kept my distance from her this time around. The only time I ever physically touched her was when I rested my head on her shoulder. I think it was because I was tired, but I can't be too certain about this either. And after that came the severance. But that's another story for another time. I'll summarize it for you just for the sake of context. I called it the severance because I was disconnecting myself from the online world, basically cutting myself out due to personal conflicts. Of course, what I did doesn't excuse anything whatsoever. I left everyone for no apparent reason other than I saw myself as toxic and wanted to get away before I gravely hurt someone. But it did plenty of emotional and probably psychological damage to everyone that I called friends. I'm not exactly a good person, but who is? And don't answer that in the comments, it's a rhetorical question. For a couple of months I handed over ownership of my server to Rory, my younger sister, but much to my dismay, it only caused internal chaos because of the way she was running it, so to speak. But again, this is another story for another time.
Let's talk about Severance in more detail. What that is basically a game Lucille created after cutting her ties with all of her previous friends. On January 1st, Lucille left without saying a word, instead made a few videos taunting her previous friends while they were still hurting immensely from her severing ties with her old friends. Lucille may claim this was because she thought herself to be a toxic person, but this video she made shortly after severing her ties doesn't seem to reflect that.
Should have had your back. I tried, but I don't think so. Maybe it was me who was fucking up. I gave all I could give, but it seems like it never really was enough.
Lucille spent the next few months releasing videos like this one that I just showed, and would only communicate with her friends via special friends she deemed worthy to keep around, worthy being friends who were so desperate for closure they never said a bad thing about Lucille. She eventually came back to close the server down for good, while making the whole thing a joke, and her chosen friends laughed along with her, completely disregarding the anguish and hurt her friends were going through, including me. This is another example of Lucille being a genuinely toxic and horrible person. Something she did that was particularly disgusting was how she treated one of her former best friends, Weston. Weston was completely destroyed by the shenanigans Lucille had pulled, as they had been friends for the better part of 2 years. And when Weston found out Lucille had another server and managed to get invited in, Lucille basically gave him the cold shoulder the whole time, modeling a character after Weston's. In fact, she still uses a character which is very obviously inspired by Weston. Weston thankfully cut ties with Lucille when it became clear she was not going to treat him with any form of kindness. Lucille is not kind or sweet or innocent. These are her true colors. She uses people, then discards them when they will no longer praise her endlessly. Truly disgusting. After this, a few months went by, and Lucille began teasing the release of Severance, a game she made with little help. But that was just salt in the wounds of those she cut ties with. The game was about her cutting ties, framing it as if she was the one in the right all this time, and her new love interest as the main character. In this game, there is a library you can visit, which contains the relationships and, surprise to no one, I was part of this library.
All these books correspond with her relationships. Look, like this. Aha, this one. The cover of the book has a girl wearing glasses on it. You see? As for the context, they met through a mutual friend, it seems. However, there was a risky age gap between the two. But that didn't stop them from openly showing their love for one another. It says here that they decided not to be in a relationship just yet. She was then told that the two of them shouldn't be together so soon. The girl she loved wanted to focus on herself. It's a little wobbly here. There appears to be no bad blood between the two. Wait. It talks about the severance. I shouldn't read any further then.
None of this is a particularly good look for Lucille.
How about we briefly change the topic to the comments I received during the first couple of hours she uploaded her video. This comment I received was by my younger sister, Rory, the same person who was running my previous server during my disappearance until its inevitable end. So before you try to use this as evidence for sexual misconduct to a minor, please don't. And I'm begging that you do not attempt to harass me or her by saying this is incest. If you care about minors so much, then leave my sister alone, okay?
No one said anything of the sort. You downplay what happened previously, and inflate the comment your sister left to the degree that it seems people are or have the intention to attack her at all.
And because there's too many of you to properly name, I'll just show as many screenshots as I can of what I'll be addressing next. Did you catch the theme in the comments? It shouldn't be that hard to figure out what it is, right? Well, if you don't know what it is, allow me to spell it out for you. Therapy. As much as I want to appreciate your concern for my well-being, you're not concerned about specifically me, are you? I don't blame any of you. What with the way I spoke to Iris, the way that I romanticized the idea that a 15 and a 20-year-old could be together, it's not something a person with a sane mind would say, right? However, telling me to get therapy isn't helping in the way you think it is. But even if I were to get therapy, it wouldn't help me either. You're treating therapy as if it were akin to curing mental illness. It's almost sickening. While I do believe it's a humane way to treat people with sexual interactions to minors, it wouldn't help me in this case. And it's because of that answer.
No one is treating therapy like a magic cure. We all know it's not perfect, but it helps. Your complete and adamant refusal to get therapy, even bashing it, may sway those in your younger audience to sway away from that if they are considering or currently getting it because their idol said it wouldn't help. This thought process is also damaging to yourself, Lucille. If you never change the way you think and still don't think you did anything wrong, which she doesn't, and proof of that will come up later on, there is every possibility you will once again prey on someone who is much younger than you, even if you are interested in someone else right now.
Which brings me to my next topic, grooming. Unfortunately, I can't say whether or not I have groomed Iris because it wasn't my intention to groom her. I wasn't getting anything out of it, unless you want to say that me romancing a 15-year-old was the motive, or that I simply wanted emotional support. I understand that grooming doesn't necessarily have to be explicit to sexual reasons.
What is the definition of grooming? Grooming is when someone builds a relationship, trust, and emotional connection with a child or a young person so they can manipulate, exploit, and abuse them. To provide unconditional emotional support is what I felt being forced upon me. That is the exploitation of a child's care and concern for someone. How this was done was Lucille revealing gradually sympathetic events in her life, making it seem like you are the only thing so far that has not yet gone wrong, and to that end, you want to continue to support and encourage her blindly no matter what. This puts intense stress and pressure onto the child, not to let down the groomer's expectations, and will feel guilty if they somehow slip up. This is what I went through. I felt as if I always had to be strong, and to support her because no one else in her life had or will. I would never talk about anything big that bothered me, unless it involved her as well. I felt like I couldn't talk about things that happened in my life that had gone wrong, because they all felt so trivial to her problems. The problem is exacerbated when I got lukewarm responses to opening up. Yes, I've told her small things, like my low self-esteem, and general times when I felt jealous. But those are things all my friends know. I've never gone into detail about my home life, or any events in my life I would consider big, because the conversation was mostly about Lucille and her struggles. Mine felt like they were always on the back burner, and that's horribly damaging to a kid who thinks this is what love is.
I'll be taking notes from this website in particular. Stage 1. Targeting the victim. I'm sorry to say this, but I wasn't targeting anyone in particular. Stage 2. Gaining the victim's trust. I suppose you can see it this way, as I was friends and trying to be more than that with her. Stage 3. Filling a need. There was no need that I had to fill. Unless you want to argue that the need I was filling was love or emotional support, then by all means, let's use that.
As previously mentioned, I have self-esteem problems, and that was very clear to Lucille. The need I had wanted filled was to feel useful, feel wanted, and to that end, Lucille succeeded in filling that need. However, as stated previously, this did not turn out to be a positive.
Stage 4 and 5 are both incorrect. I wasn't trying to isolate Iris, and neither was I trying to sexualize their relationship.
While I can agree that I did not go through stage 4, let's take another look at stage 5. Desensitizing the child to touch is the next step of the grooming process. The adult seeks to exploit the child's natural curiosity, using feelings of stimulation to advance the sexuality of the interactions. Gradually, the offender increases physical contact, patting on the back, hugging, wrestling, tickling, massaging, or kissing on the cheek. These moves can be subtle and bordering on what the child deems acceptable. Predators may present cuddling as a normal activity for adults and children who have a special relationship. All this was part of the regular time Lucille and I spent together. Suggestions of kissing, hugging, cuddling, and this was all normalized, even though it never should have been. While it may not have turned sexual outright, grooming does not always have to be sexual.
Stage 6 kind of bewilders me. Maintaining control. I don't think I was using secrecy or blame to keep Iris under my thumb. Unless you want to argue that I was subconsciously trying to keep her from accepting the truth that she was a minor in the situation and thus making our interactions obviously illegal, but keeping it in secrecy because we both believed it was nothing but love.
Maintaining control. Many groomed children are led to believe that nothing is wrong with the sexual contact between adults and children. In some cases, perpetrators need only casually mention a need for secrecy to maintain participation and silence. In this case, it was not sexual contact that was normalized, but romantic contact. The abuser may blame the victim, convincing the child that they wanted it, encouraged it, or enjoyed it, which is what she is doing currently. Using sympathy, making the child believe no one else understands the perpetrator, which is what she did before. Maintaining control means the victim keeps quiet or continues to appropriate the groomer's behavior, which is 100% what happened to me. You can see video evidence of it in my Most Toxic Person in the Animation Meme Community video, where I continue to excuse Lucille's actions.
I've said so much already, it feels like I haven't gotten anywhere. But there is something I wanted to briefly mention. It's about my first comment while the situation was gaining traction. I was currently busy at the time this situation started to garner attention towards my channel. People were claiming that they were not attacking me, but aggressively giving me advice and calling me out about how I supposedly groomed Iris. My response wasn't well thought of as it was spur of the moment, but my statement still stands. Think of it like this. When you see someone physically being harassed, whether it is sexual or not, what would you do? You would immediately call the police and not get involved personally, right? As any normal human would do. You saw me as a potential predator and thus start to act on your own accord, telling me rather aggressively that I should seek help and admit to my wrongdoings. But there's something wrong here. You didn't call the police. You actively went out of your way to expose me for the things I have supposedly done or am doing. But I'm skeptical if there will be police involvement. Not because I don't think I got away with it or that Iris doesn't deserve to be given proper justice, but because... No. I shouldn't talk about myself since you'd all think it'd be manipulative of me to bring up my past experiences, right?
Lucille tries to frame this as if I'm simply doing all this because I want clout and attention, and if this is so bad, why can't I go to the police about it? I didn't call the police. Let's break this down. First of all, these sorts of claims, if they do not directly show evidence of sexual behavior, are most likely to be swept under the bus. And even in situations where there is clear evidence of sexual behavior, like Onision's, it's very hard to get someone convicted. Secondly, like we learned from the Crystal drama, no one but the victim can get the police into action. And as stated previously, as there is not rock-solid evidence of sexual behavior, it is highly unlikely anything will happen. Then there's the issue of my parents, who, well, wouldn't take the news so well, and most likely blame me for getting involved with you at all. And getting the police would also mean getting my parents, which is not the kind of mental stress I need.
This video, this whole situation, it's about Streamline Workshop, right? And while we're speaking about Iris, let's go back to a previous topic that mentioned the severance. The time I disconnected myself entirely from the internet only to come back due to the harassment of a minor, my sister. But you probably didn't want to hear the last part, right? When I returned, it wasn't surprising to have mixed feelings about how everyone felt. Truthfully, I'm still in awe that I haven't spoken about it properly with the right people, but that's because they've made it well aware that they want nothing to do with me. I can't say for sure how Iris felt during this message or my quote-unquote revival. I could only assume that she truly didn't want me to come back, seeing how I left everyone believing that I was the worst, most awful, most toxic person.
No, I didn't, and still do not want anything to do with you. I was, at the time, still in denial of everything that had happened, and clung to the hope that maybe I could have a little closure, as Lucille was very clearly taunting me and her other ex-friends with little videos and a game in development here and there. I reasoned she had to have a good excuse for publicly toying with all of our emotions. There was no good reason. There is an explanation, but explanations are not excuses or justifications. Maybe you did leave believing all that, and if you had just left, I would not have held it against you. But you didn't just leave. You kept taunting me with videos and tidbits, basically reopening the wound you caused just to pour salt into it. However terrible someone may feel, it shouldn't then justify them going out of their way to emotionally manipulate and torture their former friends the way Lucille has. It's really quite funny how you talk about the severance as if it was a clean break. It wasn't. It was a series of events in which you continuously toyed with my and your former friends' emotions that got turned into a video game by you.
And it turned out to be true, especially when I came back. My previous friends all despised me because they must have thought my disappearance was because I hated them all, and that I was looking for a way out. Or something like that. I can't speak for them.
I wonder why your friends thought you hated them. It couldn't possibly be because you refused to speak to them directly, or because of anything you posted at all.
I'm sure they have plenty to say about me. That I create or actively pursue drama. Or that I control or manipulate others. Or maybe I'm needy, or that I use others to meet those needs. Or perhaps I'm extremely critical of myself or others. Or that I get easily jealous or envious of others. Or that I complain about my bad fortune and others' good fortune. Or maybe I abuse of substances and self-harm. Or that I'm unwilling to seek help from loved ones or a therapist. Huh? Did I just list off the symptoms of a toxic person? But anyway.
Lucille frames the situation as a duality. That you could look at her situation from that angle, or you could look at it from this one, in which Lucille can only be a victim of circumstance, and that others unreasonably hold grudges against her over things she can't control. No one has ever been upset at you over things you can't control. We were and still are upset at the decisions you actively chose to make. Like turning a situation none of us were over yet into a game for us to solve, to know what's going on, so that maybe we can be friends again.
Did it give her the right to say this comment? Perhaps. However, she should have not said anything to begin with. Giving me a happy birthday beforehand. This was kind of unnecessary.
Fuck, I guess I should have suffered in silence then. How dare I try and seek answers? How dare I try to start a conversation in a civil manner by genuinely wishing her a happy birthday without mocking her?
Now then, it's finally time I talk about the Google Drive she provided and its contents. I won't be going into the DMs just yet, but instead looking over the smaller folders first, starting with Twitter. However, I won't be talking about it myself, but instead reading a comment that someone else had made on her community post. I actually took the time to look at each one of the DMs. I immediately slipped over some parts because you and Sam were just talking to each other. Now I will say it's none of my business on that part. You two meeting and both of you talking with DMs. However, I want to say, and this is not to defend Sam, since I have no idea who they are, but fictional characters are not a form of evidence to prove that someone is a pedophile. I'm sorry. If you have more evidence of predatory behavior or both of you omitting each other's ages, please feel free to provide them. However, this is a form of criticism when providing evidence. Don't say someone's a pedophile because they find a fictional character attractive. Fictional characters do not give consent. I understand that you are currently going through things after finding out you were or are groomed, but please take the time to calm down to research your evidence over as you are showing your audience a means of misinforming others on how to spot a pedophile. The art community is not a stranger to aging up characters or making them sexy or drawing them lewd. If that was the case, then the majority of the art community would have been pedophiles then. The only ones able to state it's wrong to make fan art like this are the creators of the show. Again, I'm not saying this to downplay or ignore if you have been groomed or not. It is a form of criticism. It's understandable to make these mistakes since you are currently emotional, but please be careful what you tell your audience next time. The fictional character point was an added point. The thing we should be focusing on is that Sam was dating a minor, a 15-year-old who just turned 16. Sam's an adult. That's predatory behavior. That is exactly what this post should be focusing on. Adding the point of fictional characters being aged up, however, is not necessary compared to the predatory behavior Sam displayed to Stream, who is a real person. That is what Stream herself should focus on, not the unnecessary details. That is my point. I hold nothing against her, but the fictional character aged up thing was a unnecessary detail and it can misinform her audience on how to go about the situation. And because I'm generous, I'll show the images in question. I don't have anything to say. The commenter said it best.
Why does my channel keep cycling back to how it's not okay to lewd minors? I would really like to stop talking about this, but for some reason it just keeps coming back to haunt me. Let me make a comparison here. Say we're Antoons, and we make a comic about racism. Is that okay because they're fictional characters and are technically not hurting anyone? No, absolutely not. So then why are people trying to excuse lewding minors? This should be an issue that everyone can agree on is not okay. There is a reason why lolicon is illegal in the United States. There is a reason why it is generally frowned upon to lewd fictional minors. And it is because through lewding these minors, the normalization and acceptance that it is okay for minors to be drawn and seen in this way is a-okay. No, it's not. It doesn't matter if they're at the age of consent, it's still gross. Minors being sexual and sexualizing minors are two different things, and if you're lewding a minor character, you're doing the latter. In fact, as someone who has had their persona lewded while they were at the age of consent, I can tell you that I am still shaken by those events. It is not any less damaging because it is an illustrated piece. The fact that people want to view children in sexual positions is disgusting because anyone under 18 is still a child. Am I calling people who lewd minors pedophiles? No, and I never have. I included these pictures because it shows a pattern of behavior regarding you, Lucille, and being inappropriate when interacting with media that includes minors.
Next are the group chats. I'm not sure what you want me to say about these chats. Originally, it was banter between a small group of friends, but I suppose it could look incriminating on my end because I was in a group of minors. And here are the IRL images provided.
You will not be showing these images unless you have my permission, you say. I have not gotten one DM from you asking for approval to share these images. I am not saying that I am not okay with her using these images. I am saying that this is an example where she says one thing and then does the opposite.
Here's a fun fact for the second picture in question. There was a third party involved who took the photo for us. Sorry, but I can't give you any more information, otherwise there'll be legal actions involved. And now, for the moment you've been waiting for, the DMs in question. I'll chime in when I have something to say on the image in question. It should be fine for me to talk about this since she released this information for anyone to see, but she was the first to talk about where she lived, Alberta, Canada, Edmonton. It should be known internet logic that you should never give out your information to anyone, even if they say they live in the same place as you.
She worked it so that it seems you can't attack her for bringing up this point, since I brought it up first. Yes, my city is in these screenshots, and was public information before this video. It's fine if people decide to bring that up. However, Lucille is feigning concern that I have shared this information, but does nothing on her end to blur out the information she believes could be harmful to me, and instead focuses on it, specifying it even. Not that that shows any sort of bad intention on her part. It's almost like when I sent these images, I was a dumb, impressionable kid who was grasping at straws to make myself seem more likable to a person I liked.
What I've currently been reading to you seems fairly normal, right? However, you could argue that this was my grooming tactic. I was trying to get Iris to trust me so that I could lull her into a false sense of security. But sadly, that wasn't the case, and I'll explain why soon. But let's keep reading, shall we? I'd like to talk about this for a moment. This is when I began to trust her, telling her the reason why I don't date anymore because of my fear of abandonment. Both of these people in question have been renamed Pyro and Batter, so keep that in mind while we continue forward, okay? I'll try to give a bit of context with what memory I have of the situation. I don't remember what Fano and I spoke about, but it must have been if I had liked anybody currently. I had told her I already liked someone. My feelings for that person have since changed, but I still care about them a great bunch. This person will be mentioned later on. But here's something you need to note. Iris was the one that admitted she liked me. True, she didn't admit it, but she never denied it either.
Except right after the message, I confirmed your suspicions. I don't know why you're framing this as if I was in the wrong for making a move when I still did not know your age, and even if I did, should have ended in you rejecting me as the adult in the situation.
I did admit that I had fallen for her and that the other person was already in a relationship. And I can't believe I spoke like this. You ever look back at how you used to be as a person and feel yourself wanting to erase that part of you forever? Iris said that she was banned from dating until university due to having strict parents. Loaf. Reminds me of home at Mom's. Note that she has blurred the names for privacy reasons. How thoughtful of her.
I would like to stop the video to make note that Lucille acknowledges that I try and keep personal information unrelated to the situation from spreading. This will be important later.
Looking back at it now, my transitional phase must have been caused because I believed that men were strong enough to keep themselves and those they loved safe from harm. And that's what I wanted for my sisters. For them to be safe. Moving on.
Explanation has little to do with the situation other than to paint Lucille in a sympathetic light. There is nothing inherently wrong with her explaining this bit. What makes it bad is that she chose to put it in this video where it has no business being, and nothing to add to the discussion other than what a great person Lucille is.
If I remember correctly, at the time I was 20 years old, so my trigger joke was said because I probably knew that I was walking on thin ice, talking to someone underage at the time.
Lucille openly admitted she was wrong. This will be important later.
I understand that she wanted to give as much evidence of my supposed grooming, but this was something I hadn't expected to show up. I will briefly talk about it since it's obviously available for everyone to see. Sometime during or after New Year's, I had taken a hiatus due to an incident that resulted in a family member being stabbed, thus resulting him being taken to the hospital and the police were inevitably called. I cannot talk about it any further than that.
This is an unnecessary explanation. You go into detail about things like this, which have virtually nothing to do with the situation, other than it paints you in a more sympathetic light, and it was in the Google Drive. These are not the messages people wanted answers for. Or even later in the video, you brush off a bad message, but you're willing to go into details about this.
My memory is a little hazy, but I do remember getting a referral for a therapist. Sadly, not because I was romantically interested in a minor at the time, but because I was dealing with other mental issues. That's it. I don't remember what caused this conversation, but we'll be looking at my response at the bottom. I like being able to listen to your problems and try to help you out. If we were ever to date one day, then I want to make sure you can trust me then, just as you do now. This is the first publicly available instance where I implicate that we are not dating at the time and that we would date someday. That day would never arrive.
That's exactly why relationships, or romantic exchanges between a minor and an adult, are not okay. The minor has no clue how to deal with any of the problems brought up, and it puts an immense stress on top of them to help fix whatever is being brought up, because that's what a minor's thought process is like. That's why these sorts of interactions are damaging and can lead to post-traumatic stress or trouble dealing with stress.
Oh, you want me to explain why I said something like this? Sorry, I can't give you an answer. I could say I wasn't in the right frame of mind when I brought up self-harming, but that doesn't excuse my actions, now does it? This is false! I can proudly say that I can love another more than my own life. Oops, spur of the moment, my apologies. I guess there were other nicknames I gave her, huh? I completely forgot about that. It was wrong of me to openly talk about my current problems like this. After all, it should have been private matters such as my mom being arrested, my dad likely had cancer, and such. She was just a teenager in this situation. There wasn't anything she could do but give me emotional support. You do the same too, right? The truth of Sam was a man named Daniel. We've known each other for a long while, and we've both had our personal qualms. He would tell anyone who would listen to things about who we both were as people and our relationship with each other. Things that were bad to openly talk about for the both of us. And when it came back to Discord, he was the one who offered me his account since he thought it wasn't necessary for him to have anymore. The deleted account was me at the time. The Max and Cheese was previously Daniel's account but now has since been given ownership to me. I'm sorry if I don't remember who Naomi or the son in question is, but this is the second instance that would implicate that neither of us were dating at the time, as the son was preparing me to be your boyfriend. Huh? Oh, sorry, I got nothing.
Cue the thing I told you to remember. She actively brushes off this screenshot, but was so willing to go into detail about something irrelevant to the situation.
Let's add another tally to the implications that we were never dating. And another. What a moron this person was. Oh, this is me. Moving on. Another tally? Another tally. This was incredibly rude of me, and I'm surprised that Iris didn't blur out the person I was talking about. As his best friend, I am personally offended due to the fact that she made this public. My best friend has mental issues, just like any other normal person, and ranting about him to someone who barely knew him was starting to paint him in a bad light. To my best friend, if he's watching, I'm sorry for talking about you like this. As your friend, I should have kept this information private between us, so I hope you can forgive me.
And cue again something I told you to remember. Earlier in the video, Lucille makes note of how I tried to censor unnecessary information about the situation, and is now taking shots at me like I never made such an attempt. I will not make any excuse for my carelessness while I was gathering screenshots. I should have been more careful. I have since gone back and hopefully blurred out all the personal information that was not relevant to the situation, and any mentions of these situations from Lucille's video will henceforth be cut, both from this video and the video in the Google Drive, since she has made it clear she does not want this information to be publicly available. It is also possible for Lucille to cut these parts out of her video with YouTube Studio.
I see you still haven't blurred out his nickname. This is truly sickening. Iris, if you're watching this, and I know you will be, you and everyone else can accuse me of being a child predator, a supposed groomer. But you had no right to be giving people private and traumatizing information like this. I was trying not to speak about myself whatsoever in this video, because otherwise, everyone would accuse me of playing the victim card. But because you put something like this, then you give me no choice but to speak about it. I don't care how much you dehumanize me by giving people our private DMs, attempting to show everyone my alleged grooming behavior. But this is a new low, even for someone like yourself. You presented this, and I will gladly read it for all.
As I have said before, I make no excuses for my carelessness while I was collecting these screenshots. I should have been more careful with what I put out. I would like to point, however, that for information you did not want public, you made no attempts yourself to censor this information in your own video, and go in depth about these situations instead, which no one was asking you to do, and achieves nothing but to make yourself seem more sympathetic. I am not at all discrediting the situation she had to endure. I am discussing why it was such a terrible idea for her to bring it up in such explicit detail in this situation, and why it is unnecessary. If this is something you truly did not want out there, you didn't have to then go on and read and explain it in detail. This action can't be for anything other than to gather sympathy from the audience, because it has no correlation to this current situation and could easily have been blurred out with an explanation.
I've said all that I wanted to on this matter. Let's continue. This was when Iris admitted that she did not want to be in a relationship anymore, although she was never in one to begin with. But nonetheless, I accepted her decision, telling her that I'd support her, because that's what any romantic interest, now turned hopeless crush, would do, right?
She said herself that we both thought we would be dating when I turned 16. I turned 16 and automatically assumed that meant we were dating. This screenshot happened after my 16th birthday, which is June 26th. And once more she frames herself as a victim, using the words hopeless crush to describe herself.
I still listen to audios. I even make sure to support the voice artists to do them. Moving on.
Lucille not addressing what people actually want her to address, and instead focusing on something else. Example, who's counting?
Still not blurring names, are you? As an adult talking to a minor at the time about things like this, I can safely say that I too am disgusted with how seemingly easy it was to talk about this. No privacy for the innocent, I see. I've had to wait a considerable amount of time for the evidence to be uploaded. But now that we've gone through everything, it isn't up to me whether or not I should say what I said was right or wrong. You wouldn't believe me anyway if I said I wasn't trying to purposely groom her, now would you? There's another comment you want me to see. I must have glossed this over because they too were telling me to get therapy, but had I looked at it a little longer, They've stated that this was obviously caused by trauma. Very well. This will be the last time I ever talk about myself in this sense. What I did, or what I supposedly did, was not caused by trauma. At least, that's what I believe. The things that have happened to me throughout my life should not have caused something like this to happen. That's all I'm going to say. Truthfully, this isn't the first time I've been publicly called out, but it wasn't because I was a predator. Unless you want to call a 10-year-old a pedophile, or with the term butyliophile in this case.
I did not call you a pedophile, and please stop trying to make it seem that children can, in any way, in these sorts of scenarios, be at fault. It is damaging for your fans who will believe you, and therefore discredit future and current victims. And it is damaging to those who are watching and considering coming out, who will then believe it is in some way their fault because they had a scary term tacked onto them.
But that was in the past, right? Whatever happened to me doesn't matter in this case. Not anymore. Because nobody would believe me and continue to dehumanize me. There's so much more I want to talk about, but unfortunately, if I lose my composure or show signs of snapping or weakness, you'll probably think that you've won, right? True, that's a childish way of seeing this, like a game of who wins or loses.
Funny how you mentioned treating the situation like a game when you're the one acting like a video game character, but I digress.
But I, as an adult, cannot excuse my actions, nor can I make excuses for them, saying that I wasn't in the right frame of mind, or blaming my mental illnesses, or even blaming Iris for what I've said.
Remember her saying these words. They will be important later.
Nobody here is to blame but myself, right? I should take full responsibility for what I've done. But what does that mean to you? What would I have to do to accept responsibility? Deleting my channel? Deleting my social medias? Deleting my online presence? Or maybe getting locked in jail, serve my time, get therapy, and be admitted to a psych ward? Or perhaps you'd rather want me to take my own life as atonement. But that doesn't sound fair, now does it?
She poses as if asking her to take responsibility means we are expecting her to do these ludicrous things. The only thing that has been asked of you, and not even by myself, is that you apologize, take responsibility, and consider getting some medical help. Do not overbloat this to make it seem like the other side is being unreasonable. If you are not apologizing, that means you do not even acknowledge there to be wrongdoing in the first place, and therefore cannot take responsibility for any of your actions. That is why people are so mad. As for myself, I do not want an apology from you, and do not use this as an excuse to say you don't need to apologize. I do not want closure from you. I simply do not want you to be part of my life ever again.
And you're probably expecting me to get on my knees and grovel, right? To apologize to Iris for the things I've supposedly done to her. Would that give her, and everyone else, including you, the closure that you wanted? But what would me apologizing accomplish? Nonetheless, if you want me to apologize, I will. Unless you don't want to hear me half-ass it because I was forced to due to mob mentality in the comments. Which I'd like to say is rather unprofessional for every party here. Iris created a video to talk about her experience with a quote-unquote predator, which meant she knew what she was getting herself into, correct? Anyway, she openly explains and admits that she could most likely have been groomed by me, saying that she believed it was her fault because her parents conditioned her to believe that every problem in her life was all on her.
Why do you sound so condescending when you're explaining this? It's almost as if you agree with my parents or something.
People publicly expressing that she shouldn't defend the 20-year-old she was dating at the time, but had mutual feelings for. And yes, in her video she was indecisive to give information on who supposedly groomed her, but she did so anyway, even providing a link in the description. She stated, "While I do realize this would make it more accessible for people to attack her, not giving it out would completely defeat the purpose of me making this video because no one would know who I'm talking about. And while yes, it is true because of how easy it was to find me with the link provided, people still came to my channel. You can say in your comment that you didn't come out to attack me, but that's not entirely true. You commenting and saying things like get help is an attack on my person.
Believing that people are attacking you by telling you you need to seek professional help is quite the leap in logic. Those are not attacks. People saw my video and wanted you to take responsibility for your actions, which include getting better. You're framing this again as if you are the victim in the situation, which is untrue.
You're attacking me because you believe that my mental health is a risk for everyone. And another thing she stated, I don't want anyone to go out to witch hunt or harass her. I would just like people to stay away if it's possible. And I'm honestly not surprised to see that nobody listened to her. You listened to the part where she was supposedly groomed, but that last bit just didn't register with you, did it? She wanted you to stay away from me if I was a potential predator, and yet you're still all here in my comments denying that you're attacking me. I'd like to end this part with one more thing. She even admitted that what she was saying could easily ruin someone's life. It's safe to say that my life has already been ruined before. You're fine, Iris. The only thing keeping me alive is the hope I feel thanks to the few people who continue to trust and support me, including him. So no, I don't think I should apologize. Not because I don't want to or that I should, but because I never intended for something like this to happen. But that's probably something you didn't want to hear from me, right? Then allow me to try and apologize. I'm sorry that I was attracted to you as a person and not because of your age.
This has to be one of the oldest excuses in the Predator textbook, and I'm quite shocked to hear it.
That I loved and worried about your well-being as a romantic interest should. I'm sorry that I supposedly groomed and manipulated you into keeping quiet about our illegal romantic interactions. That I subjected you to the traumatizing paragraphs of my horrid romantic writing.
I have already explained all this previously, so we'll be moving on.
Now that I'm truly sorry for, just thinking about the things I said and the way I used emotes made my stomach churn. Oh, right, I'm getting off topic. I'm sorry that so many people had to attack my person, calling me a pedophile and a child predator, when it should be common knowledge that you were not a child, but a growing adolescent.
A child is someone under 18.
I'm sorry that I didn't listen to you when you said not to witch hunt or harass me, and to stay away from me. But you can't blame them, right? You have a young fan base, and it's not uncommon to see a kid go against what someone says. Oh, but there were a few mentions of a commenter being an adult. Then shouldn't they know better, too, and respect the wishes of the minor in question? Which, by the way, if you were a grown adult, you wouldn't be talking like this. That's quite immature of you, and people were telling me to be the adult in the situation. I'm sorry that innocent bystanders had to be harassed by impatient people. And I'm sorry that you had to bring up my past trauma to expose me as a child predator. Whew. Does everyone feel a little better now? I would hope not. What I said goes against what you wanted me to originally say, right? It's upsetting that things had to end up this way. However, I cannot be truly upset with any of it. If people believe that attacking me, ridiculing me, and advising that I get therapy will help the situation in any way, shape, or form, then so be it. If it makes you all happy or think that you're removing the despair by the roots before it grows into something potentially dangerous, then, by all means, say whatever you want about me. Everything that happens on the internet stays on the internet forever, right? Then I'll continue to keep my head up high and look for a better future, a brighter hope, if it means this whole situation will eventually die down and all parties have been satiated.
The situation is not going to die down, not until you take responsibility for your actions.
Before I end the video, for real this time, I'd like to clarify something. You've probably been waiting for me to say this since the beginning, that answer I was talking about. You all believe that I'm attracted to a certain age group, right? But that's not true in my case. I'll be using him as a brief example. I won't be naming him since you'd all probably start to harass or warn him that I'm a possible child predator. But even so, I know he'd understand my point of view. He's the same age as me. Surprising, I know.
That does not make this any better. You still showed the capability to be attracted to someone completely out of your age range, and have not even considered the possibility that that in itself is a dangerous thing, as evident by your lack of an apology.
But would that make me a teleophile? I can't believe I had to bring that up again. The truth is, I didn't like or love Iris because she was a minor. It was because I genuinely liked her as a person. She's the type of person to give rather than to take. She always put everyone else's needs in front of hers, and kept her problems to herself because she believed it was her fault and that she was the only person who could take responsibility for her own problems. But I shouldn't be talking about her like that anymore. We're no longer friends.
Lucille leaves the video off as if she still holds me in some sort of good light, which is not the case at all, as evident by the comment section and her Discord server. Lucille is seen here, actively endorsing someone who has said in the livestream chat that I was faking depression for views, and we'll talk about the Discord server later.
I could say it was in the past, but that's not fair to say for myself either. And now that I have him to support me, along with the others, with him and them around, I know I'll be fine, because I love him as a person, and not because of his age. It's incredibly childish and a one-track way of thinking, don't you think? I'm one to speak. But thank you for taking the time to listen. I leave it up to you to come up with your own conclusion. Hope, a fair given life. Despair, a loss given strife. To meet them both could be folly, or that of a great ecstasy.
The message at the end is unnecessary, and further shows how Lucille is treating this entire situation as a Danganronpa simulator. And that's the end of her video, but I'm not done just yet. Firstly, I would like to take a look at her description that she put out. All parties are at fault for unprofessionalness, which should be unprofessionalism. Streamline abruptly made a video without scripting, added unnecessary images. Well, I can agree with the latter half of the statement, assuming she's talking about the uncensored images, which I have corrected in the Google Drive. But the first half I can't agree with on any level. When a victim comes out, whether it's scripted or not, will never be a mistake. And I am deeply disgusted that you believe that to be a mistake on my part, in any capacity. Next, I would like to talk about the mods involved in the situation. You all disgust me, and I do not want anything to do with you or your friends ever again in the future. You blatantly shut down anyone in the chat who didn't agree with Lucille, and were completely fine when this guy says things like I'm faking depression for views. Absolutely horrendous behavior, especially when most of you are old enough to comprehend the situation in its entirety. I would also like to mention the subtle manipulation across Lucille's entire channel. She has turned on manual review for the comments, so that only the ones who are praising her are in the comment section, and has disabled the like-to-dislike ratio to manipulate the narrative. To someone just stumbling into the situation, it would seem as if everyone was agreeing with her. This sort of manipulation tactic is deplorable, especially when it's children that are being manipulated. Lastly, I would like to talk about her Discord server. I've received a few images from her server that paint her in a less than savory light. Many people who have watched her video have found it disingenuous, and that she never intends to change, nor does she see herself as doing anything wrong. But it could always have been argued that she was intending to change. At least, it could have been argued until these screenshots right here have her saying she believes me to be the one in the wrong. The mental gymnastics it must have taken to reach this conclusion is frankly baffling. These sort of sentiments, however, are also dangerous for her audience, her obviously very young and impressionable audience. These kids are supporting a predator and believes that she truly did do little to no wrong. This is the sort of mentality that makes them vulnerable to other predators out there, and it is terrifying to think about. Lucille, in trying to validate herself to her young fan base and those around her, is putting these minors in danger, and that is very concerning. If someone is using their platform to influence kids like this, I do not believe they should have an audience. This situation has been weighing on my mind for a very long time, and I needed to speak up properly about it. I'm sorry it took this long for me to make it. I was not and still am not in a great mental state. I would like to thank all of my friends who have been supporting me through the situation, and prison mate Luke who has encouraged me to speak out. And I would like to thank you guys as well for being here to support me and my story, even though I was reluctant to believe it myself. I hope that this video has provided enough explanation to everything that has happened, including the things Lucille didn't mention, as to paint her own narrative. Thank you for listening to this video, and please share it around. My situation is vastly different than what is normally talked about when the discussion of grooming comes into the chat, but it is just as important for people to be aware of. I hope that this video was informative, and until next time, ciao.